Developers Live. Today we're going to be doing office hours for the Google Drive SDK. My name's Ali, this is Claudio, and this is Alain.
Hi.
And we're three engineers on the Google Drive SDK Developer Relations team. So we're going to get started today. If you don't know about Google Drive SDK, we do our support on Stack Overflow. We find it's really useful to get community engagement, and today we're going to go through some of the interesting questions, and our experts here are going to answer them for you. So let's get started right away. The first question I've got is it possible to get the owner for a Google Drive file? That's pretty self-explanatory. I won't go into the detail. We have a sharing system in Google Drive, and part of that sharing system is an owner. Could you describe that slightly for us, Claudia, how the permission system works?
So for each file you have, users can have access to that file with different roles. So obviously one of the users will be the owner of the file, the guy who created the file, or you can also transfer ownership to another user. But also you can have other people allowed to access the file in a read-only mode, and they're readers, or in a read-write mode, and they're editors or writers. So what this guy is trying to do is to have a programmatic way to find the owner of file in Drive. Let's say there are actually two ways to do it at the moment. With the Google Drive API, the new API we recently launched, each file has a set of metadata, and that metadata includes a field called user permission, which will list what the permission for the current user is. So with this field, you can just find out whether you are the user, well, the owner or not, or if you're a writer or if you're a reader on that file. Broader solution would require using the Documents List API, which is the older API that interacts with the same resources that the Drive API works with. And with the Documents List API, you can request ACL, so Access Control List feed for each file or resource, and then from there you will see all the users that are listed, and for each of them you can get what permissions they have, all users and groups as well.
Okay. And what happens if a file doesn't have an owner?
I'm not sure that's possible.
It's a trick question.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I'm not sure that's possible, because you can not delete the owner. You can pass the ownership to someone else.
Exactly.
But you cannot delete the owner.
Okay. So all files in Google Drive must have at least one owner.
Yeah. And there are actually, I mean, this is something that happened in the enterprise environment. Let's say you're in your company, you have documents, and one document is owned by one of the employees, and the employee leaves the company. Of course, we need to assign that document ownership to someone else. So domain administrators can change the ownership of a document, so using like super administrator permissions, and they can still take ownership of the document so that the document is not lost.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Let's get on to our next question. Does anyone know if the Google Docs API supports commenting? I'm trying to build an app that allows me to add comments and tagging to files on G Drive. Now, if you've ever used Google Docs, you know that there's a pretty cool, well, we think pretty cool commenting system, in that you can write a comment against any piece of text in a document, and then people can reply to those comments, and people can resolve those comments, and it's a really good way of collaboratively iterating and working on a document. Now, this question is asking, can you programmatically access the comment stream using the Google Docs or Google Drive API? Alain?
Well, unfortunately, this is not available through any of our APIs, or neither through the Documents List API nor the Drive API. But it's actually a good feature to have. So we are discussing having it, and we hear your feedback, and we'll get back to you as soon as we have more updates on that.
It's one of the more requested features.
I mean, it's something people love in Google Docs, is that they can add comments and collaborate on the same document. And actually, it's probably worth mentioning that you can only have comments on native Google Docs, right?
That's right.
So you can store any kind of files on Google Drive, but you can only collaborate on them and add comments with native Google Docs. And so there's also a second part of the question.
Now they're asking for a tagging API. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I guess it means it's trying to work out a way of adding custom metadata, i.e. application-specific, non-Google Drive metadata to a file. Claudio, you're going to answer that for us?
Yeah, because I suggested something on Stack Overflow, and so there's no way to add custom metadata, but there's a field that is called description, which is a string field, so you can basically put whatever you want, any kind of data there. And I assume that this question was about like string tags. So developers can use the description field, which is available through the Docs List API, the Documents List API, and store, let's say, a space-separated list of tags or comma-separated list of tags there, and then do build their logic, assuming that the description is actually a container for tags.
Now, the beauty of using that description field is that when you then search, either in the Docs user interface, the user can do a search just by typing, or if you do a search query using the Documents List API, that description field is queried. So if you put 20 tags and one of them is banana and one of them is fruit, if you do a search for fruit, your documents will appear. So it's not just a hack, it's actually a pretty good way of tagging and then retrieving the data that is tagged with that.
I'm actually thinking about a kind of hacky solution, another one.
Bring it on.
So, with the Drive API, we have indexable text that third-party applications can set. Tags are not exactly indexable text, but maybe you can still want to use them. And any piece of information you put in the indexable text will be searchable as well. So you will have about the same functionality using another field, which is also available with the new API.
That is that the indexable text is write-only, so neither the user or the developer has access to this field once it is set. So if you want to tag a document without it being displayed to other applications or the user, this is the way to go. If you want the user to see the tag and appear like on the web UI in other applications, you should use the description.
So we mentioned indexable text, and we know what that means. Doesn't actually. Can you explain what indexable text is, Alain?
Yes. So the Drive API lets you create two types of documents. You can either choose to store the data behind a file on Drive, or store the data in your own server if you already have an existing application and an existing database. Well, one of the cool feature on Drive on the web UI is to be able to search documents. But if the data is stored on your back end, we have no way to know what's stored in your data. So developers can set data in the indexable text field so that Drive knows how to index your files, and user can search your files and have them appear on the search result.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe another question related to that is that can you add indexable text to any kind of documents or any kind of files?
Well, I would suggest that it's used only on the shortcut, but I believe you can set that on both.
So I think you can set it on both, but obviously there's a problem there because documents that Google Docs knows about and stored there, sometimes Google Drive does do indexing of its own. For example, a photo, something like that, it sets the indexable text. So if you in the API set the indexable text, then you're overwriting potentially what we've got written.
Yeah, but if you have a binary file format that your application is the only one that uses it, and you're sure that we don't understand anything out of it, then you should probably provide us with indexable text so that we can give users that text.
Very much depends on the use case. If you do have this use case, get in touch with us, and we'd love to talk to you about it.
And when we say talk with us, remember next week is Google I/O.
Absolutely.
So it's our main event of the year. It's next week in San Francisco, the Moscone Center. We're all going to be there. Yes. And we love to meet you and to get your feedback there. And of course, there will be announcements.
Of course, there will be announcements. as there are every year at I/O. So come and find us. We'll be in a Drive area if you're attending that. So we'll all be there, as will some of the important people in the Google Drive ecosystem. So this is really your chance to come and speak to us face to face and tell us how great we are, or tell us what we could be doing better.
Better the best. The first one.
So please just keep it to good feedback. So next question. I think we've got time for a couple more.
Sure.
How to share a file to other people using the Google Drive SDK. So you've seen our sharing model. Claudio's spoken about how you retrieve the permissions. This is the other side of it, how to add a permission to a Google Drive document. Who wants to talk about this?
You?
Me? Okay, so as Claudio said, we've got access control lists. Currently, at the moment, with the Drive API, you can't perform this functionality. You will need to use the Google Documents List API. Now, each document has a feed that is essentially the permissions. We call them ACLs in the Documents List API. And each of those permissions has a person or a group of people or a domain that it applies to, and it has a role associated with it. So you can say, I want the domain google.com to be able to read, that's the role, this document. And additionally, we have other little roles like commenting and that kind of thing. It's all fairly well documented, so check that out. So how do we add it? Well, essentially just post to the ACL feed for a document, and that will do that. There's an extra thing there. Is in some situations you might have, well, in two specific situations. One, you may have to add many files, give one person permission to do many files. Now, there's two quick ways of doing that. The first one is you can do batching. Okay, so we allow batching of ACLs. You send 100 at the same time for the same file, and that just saves you making many requests. The other way of doing it is you can move or create a folder and copy all these files into that folder, and then just share the folder. So again, that will save you some time. So there are some little tricks with this, but currently you can't use the Drive API, unfortunately. You use the Documents List API. This is one of our most popular functionalities because it's really good to automate that. You don't really want to, if you're in an organization, you don't really want to do that one by one in the Drive user interface.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to stress again that the Drive API and the Documents List API work on the same resources.
Yeah,
so you can mix the two. They have a different security model. You can use one of them or the other according to your needs. But I mean, if you need to use the Documents List API and you're worried that your user is upgraded to Drive, there's no problem at all there because they all use the same files.
With the same files, with the same IDs, and it's the same data. So what you do in one will be reflected in the other. It's exactly the same data. Okay. Great. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Ali.
Okay. How to build a desktop client for Google Drive?
It's one of my favorite questions. How to build a desktop client.
We have it so many times.
Yeah, I want to build a desktop application for Windows OS and use Google Drive to save some data in the cloud.
I would say download the Google Drive application for Windows that we provide.
So that's a great answer.
That's a good answer.
But perhaps this user just wants a bit of Drive functionality. They just want to save some data to Drive, and they don't necessarily want to. Actually, again, our Google Drive client would be the best way because your application could just copy it to a file and we'd handle the sync. But if you really want to do it yourself, currently, can you do this with the Google Drive API?
Unfortunately not. The Google Drive API requires that a user install the applications from the Chrome Web Store. There have been many debates about why we need to do that, so we are working on improving the story here, but right now the current situation makes it impossible to use the Drive API for desktop clients.
So what would this user use?
Well, as Claudio and Ali mentioned earlier, the Document List API, which works on the same resources and allow users to write actually desktop client that doesn't need to be installed from the Chrome Web Store and can work on the same type of resources.
Okay, thanks.
Well, this question is also very specific about C++ and Windows. Do we have any problems with those?
No, we love C++ and we love Windows.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we must say that there is no client library for C++ that we provide.
Google supported client library.
But the protocol is described in the docs, and they're all HTTP requests.
HTTPS requests.
HTTPS requests. So you can easily build your client in any language.
Any language that can pass XML, essentially.
Yes, it can send requests
over HTTP.
Yeah.
So sorry, C++ users, we do get that question occasionally. As far as I can tell from C++ developers, they love writing code anyway. So, Alain?
Well, I do love C++. Too bad I haven't written C++ in a long time. But as Claudia mentioned, the API is a REST API. You just need a HTTP client, send data through the wire, through the HTTP, and read data from the API through HTTP as well, or HTTPS, and parse and write XML.
Okay,
Great.
Thank you. So next question, possibly our last question, because we'd like to talk about it a bit. The question is, I'm using the docs upload view in the Google Picker to upload documents to the Google Drive. However, I want to add content to the description and the indexable text fields at the time of uploads. What would be a simple way to do this? So, Claudio, first, if you could
should start explaining what the
picker
what the picker is,
and then Alain or one of you can explain how the answer. So, what's
the
picker?
The Picker API is one of the APIs we provide to developers. It's part of the Google Drive SDK, and it is a JavaScript API that you can use in your web pages to get upload or download file picker dialog for free from us. So with a few lines of code, you can integrate your web application with Drive and list your files, or as in this case, you're also allowed to upload files to Drive with a simple drag and drop from your browser, or you can you have the common browse dialog from your environment, from your
So I'm getting that right, Claudio. Someone can just add 2 or 3 lines of JavaScript,
let's say
10 lines of JavaScript to their page, and they will be able to pop up a dialog that looks exactly like a Google Docs dialog.
It doesn't look exactly, because it is exactly the same dialog we use, and it's about 10 lines of code, because you have to write maybe 7 lines to define the features you want. And let's say you want upload or not. Let's say you want multiple views. You want multiple uploads at the same time, and then you have to define a callback. That is the one that is called when the upload process is complete, or when the user has selected a file. And yeah, we have sample code in our docs, and we also recently published a blog post showing how to have both upload and picker in the same dialog.
So now that we know what the picker is, what's the upload view? What you mean? You can upload files as well using this picker?
Yeah. So you, by using this, you don't need to write code to upload files to Drive. If you want to, you can just pop up this dialog using those few lines of JavaScript code, and then the user can drag files on it, and those files will be added to the user's Google Drive account.
Fantastic. So you don't need to write any more code to do that.
Yeah, in order to insert a file, the API requires you to send a POST request with specific parameters and the payload and different parameters of the request. With this, you just need to say, I want an upload dialog, and when the user is done, I want to do this, which is a callback.
Okay, perfect. So I won't rush an extra question. I think that's...
the second part of the question.
Oh, was there a second part?
Yeah, the second part was how to add some metadata to the
yes, that was the
uploaded
important
files.
part. My apologies. How do you add extra data in description or indexable
And the question
text?
is specifically about description and indexable text fields we talked about earlier. And unfortunately, the answer is you can't.
With a Pico API.
With the Pico API.
No, you can't.
So how would you do it, Alain?
Well, if you want to write like a full client-side application only in JavaScript, you can use the JavaScript client library that Google supports, which also can talk to the Drive API. So once the file is uploaded to Drive, the callback will provide you with a file ID, and you can use this file ID to send an update request to the API to add the description and the indexable text. That will require 2 requests. That's unfortunate, but might be the easiest way to do it. And the client library is very easy to use as well. Few lines of code, I would say one or 2 lines for authorization, and this should be handled already by your code. And the same thing, few lines of code to send the update request.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Right. Sorry to cut you off halfway through that one.
No worries.
Right. So that's. Thank you for coming to our office hours. There's just a few questions. We'll have different types of GDL, Google Developer Live events throughout the course of the week and every week, but hopefully we'll be repeating this. So keep asking your Stack Overflow questions. We enjoy answering them on Stack Overflow and online as well. So thank you very much. See you at I/O if you're coming.
Yeah, hope to see you at I/O.
Yeah. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye. The events will be live streamed. At Google I/O will be live streamed, so if you're not attending in person, please follow us online.
So, and this is the time for the shameless plug, right?
What do you mean
shameless plug? When we say that Alan and I are going to present about Android development for Drive at I/O, and we know we got so many questions about it, so we're going to talk about it next week.
Exciting time.
Shameless plug.
So it's not even shameless. If you're into Android and you want to write Drive apps, come along and see these guys. There will be other talks as well. Great. So thanks very much, everyone. And
thank you.
Goodbye from us.
Bye.